In all his plottings, Luke had never thought of the screen door being locked. Though he knew his own parents locked up at night when they didn't forget, the doors at his house had always been open for him, and he'd never been near anyone else's door. Idiot, he muttered to himself. He tugged harder on the door, but he couldn't concentrate enough to make his hands work together. Each second that passed made the hair on the back of his neck stand up more. He'd never been so exposed in his entire life. Hurry, 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 get out of sight. The door didn't budge. He'd have to turn around, now. That was what his brain said. What his hand did was plunge through the screen. He pulled the wire away from the frame and reached through. The screen scraped the back of his hand and his arm, but he didn't stop. He fiddled with the lock inside until he heard it click. It's a little bit surprising. What we know about Luke and how timid he is and how nervous he is, and then he just hulks out and punches through a screen door. He silently slid the screen door back and stepped past the hanging blinds into the sports family's house. Even with the blinds blocking every window, the room he entered was airy and bright. From the freshly painted walls to the sparkling glass tables to the polished wood floor, everything looked new. Luke stared. Almost all the furniture in his own house had been around as long as he could remember, and whatever patterns and designs it originally carried had long ago been worn away. At his house, even the once orangish couch and the once greenish chairs were now all a matching sort of brownish gray. This room was different. It reminded him of a word he'd never heard, only read: pristine. Nobody had ever stepped on these white rugs with manure-covered boots. Nobody had ever sat on these pale blue couches with corn dust-covered jeans. I'm sorry, I don't care what color your rug is. You best not be walking on it with manure boots. Don't come in my house with your manure boots. I don't care how new the rug is. Jeez. Luke might have stood by the door forever in awe, but someone coughed in another room. He heard a strange beep, 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 beep. He tiptoed forward. Better to discover than be discovered. He went down a long hallway. The beeps had turned into a drawn-out buzz coming from a room at the end. Holding his breath, Luke stopped outside the door to that room and gathered the nerve to peek in. His heart pounded. There was still time to escape unseen, to go back to his house and attic and normal, safe life. But he would always wonder. Luke leaned forward slowly, moving a fraction of an inch at a time until he could just barely see around the door. Inside the room was a chair and a desk and a big apparatus that Luke vaguely recognized as a computer. And at the computer, typing away furiously, sat a... Luke blinked, thrown off. Somehow he'd never thought about the sports family's third child being a girl. She was mostly facing away from Luke, and she wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt, not much different from what the sports family brothers always wore. Her dark hair was almost as short as Luke's, but there was something about the curve of her cheek, the tilt of her head, the way her sweatshirt clung or didn't cling to her body. All of that made Luke certain she wasn't like him. He blushed, then gulped. The girl turned her head. Luke croaked. Before he had a chance to think of another word, the girl was across the room and had knocked him down. Then she pinned him to the floor, his arms twisted behind his back, his face buried in the carpet. Luke struggled to turn his head to breathe. So, the girl hissed in his ear, you think you could sneak up on a poor, innocent, unsuspecting girl who's home all alone? Guess nobody told you about our alarm system. A call went out to our security guards the minute you stepped on our property. They'll be here any second. Luke panicked. So, this was how he'd die. He had to explain. He had to escape. No, he said. They can't come. Oh, yeah? The girl said. Who are you to stop them? Luke raised his head as much as he could. He said the first words that came into his mind. Population police. The girl let go. There is so much to unpack for Chapter 15. We left at such an exciting part. Chapter 14 is a big deal. So he met the third child. She's a she. And she tackled him. Chapter 15. Luke sat up, checking his arms to make sure she hadn't broken anything. "You're lying," the girl said, but she made no effort to tackle him again. She crouched, looking puzzled for a few moments. Then she grinned. I got it. You're another one. Great code word. I'll have to think about using that for the rally." Now it was Luke's turn to squint in confusion. The girl giggled. "I mean, you're another shadow child, right?" Shadow? Luke wondered why his brain seemed to be slowing down. Was it just because she seemed several miles ahead of him? "That's not the term you used? I thought shadow child was universal, but an illegal. Someone whose parents broke population law 3903, a third." Luke couldn't bring himself to confess. He'd broken so many taboos today, leaving the house, standing in the open yard, talking to a stranger. He didn't mention breaking and entering. Why did one more violation matter? "You can say it," the girl coaxed. "I'm a third child. Why should there be anything wrong with that?" Luke was spared having to answer her because she suddenly sprang to her feet, exclaiming, "Oh no, the alarm!" She raced down the hall and around the corner. Luke followed to find her jerking open a closet door, then punching buttons on a panel of colored lights. Too late. Drat! She ran to a phone, Luke following breathlessly. Okay, hold on. She is moving so fast and saying so much. And all Luke has said since he saw her, if we could go back a couple pages, he gulps. He says, he says, "No, population police, shadow, that's all he's saying." How is she talking? Really fast. She's saying a lot. She seems to know what's going on. She got over her shock pretty quickly. She's saying full sentences. And she's physically moving a lot more than him, too. She's running all over. Is he used to having that much freedom in his house? Let's talk about the buttons she had to push. And she's talking about an alarm. You guys had wondered if the alarm she threatened him with in the last chapter was actually real. It would be a good threat, but it turns out it is real. And if you have an alarm system at your house, then you probably know what she's doing. If you don't, let's talk about it. You can set your alarm system to go off whenever a door opens when it's not supposed to. You can also put it on a slight delay because sometimes you open the door and you forget to turn it off on your keychain or whatever. And so you can go over to the wall and turn it off because it's on a delay. It won't officially notify the security system or the police right away. But sometimes your hands are full of groceries or you can't make it to the panel for some reason on time. Then after the delay is up, it officially starts ringing and it will call the security company and the police. There's still one way out of it. The security company sometimes will call you or you call them, and then you could still give them a special top secret special password. And they'll be like, "Oh, okay, we'll stop the call. We'll stop the police. We understand that happens. Okay, bye." So why is it a problem then for Jen that she didn't get to the panel in time?
Because the police might be coming. Yeah.
The police might be coming because she didn't turn the panel off in time. Well, why can't she just call the security company and tell them Oh, she's a third child. She's not supposed to exist. And so now she is running to a phone. Has Luke ever talked on a phone before? No. I am sure he has not. She dialed. Luke watched in amazement. He'd never talked on a phone. His parents had told him the government could trace calls, could tell if a voice on a phone was from a person who wasn't allowed to exist or not. "Dad," she made a face. I know. Call the security company and tell them to cancel the alarm, okay?" Pause. And might I remind you that the penalty for harboring a shadow child is $5 million or execution, depending on the mood of the judge? She rolled her eyes at Luke while she listened to what seemed to be a long answer. Oh, these things happen. Another pause. Yeah, love you too. Thanks, Dad. She hung up. Luke wondered if he should run back to his house immediately before the population police really did show up. They can find you now, just from the phone, the girl laughed. They say, but everybody knows the government's not that competent. Luke started inching toward the back door, just in case. So his parents won't let him even talk on the phone because they're afraid the government can find him. Does she or her family have that same level of concern? No.
It's probably because they know more.
Maybe they're more informed. Maybe they have some reason to be less terrified and paranoid. She says the government's not competent. So I think she believes they could do it, but she doesn't think they're smart enough to actually get it done. Very different. They're two different characters for sure. Luke started inching toward the back door just in case. But there really was an alarm, and you have security guards? Sure, doesn't everyone? The girl took another look at Luke. Oh, maybe not. She winced apologetically as soon as she'd said that. Luke decided to ignore the insult. Do the security guards know you're here? He asked. Of course not. If they came, I'd have to hide. Personally, I think my family just has the alarm system to make sure I stay in the house. They don't know I can disable it. But, she gave him an evil grin, I set it off sometimes, just for fun. That's fun? Luke asked. He'd thought another third child would understand him, be just like him. This girl sure wasn't. Aren't you scared the guards might find you? Not really, the girl shrugged. And see, doing it on purpose every now and then helped us today. My dad didn't even ask why the system needed to be stopped. He just thought it was me making trouble again. In a twisted way, she kind of made sense. But trying to figure everything out made Luke's head hurt. He glanced toward the door. If he could just get safely home, he'd never complain about being bored again. Here, he felt as baffled as Alice in Wonderland from one of the old books in the attic. Or he remembered something he had read in a nature book. Maybe he was like the prey of a snake that hypnotized its victims before it ate them. Those are two similes. He didn't think the girl would hurt him, but she might keep him confused and fascinated until the population police or the security guards or someone else arrived. The girl saw where he was looking. Am I scaring you? Shadow kids can be so jumpy. You're safe, you know. How about if we start over? Would you care for a seat? What's your name anyway? Luke told her. Nice to meet you, the girl said, shaking his hand in a way that made him feel like she was kind of making fun of him. Then she led him to sit down on a couch in the room he'd first entered. She perched beside him. I'm Jen. Really, it's Jennifer Rose Talbot. But do I look like a Jennifer? She shook her head and spread out her arms as if Luke should understand something from her rumpled sweatshirt and messy hair. Luke frowned. I don't know. I don't know any Jennifers. Just Matthew and Mark and Mother and Dad. He knew his parents' real names were Edna and Harlan, but he wondered if he shouldn't keep that secret, just in case. Probably he shouldn't have even mentioned Matthew and Mark. But he was surprised into it, thinking suddenly about how there was a world full of people outside his house, with a world full of different names he'd never heard of. The girl said. Then I have to explain. A Jennifer's supposed to be like really girly and prissy. So the joke's on Mom. She wanted some frilly little girl she could put in a lacy dress and sit in a corner, like a doll. She paused. Are Matthew and Mark your older brothers? Luke nodded. So you've never met anyone outside your immediate family? Luke shook his head no. Jen looked so amazed. He felt he had to defend himself. And you have? he asked with almost the same taunting voice he sometimes used with Mark. Well, yeah, she said. But you're a third child, too. A shadow child, right? He suddenly felt like it might be easy to cry if he let himself. All his life he'd been told he couldn't do everything Matthew and Mark did because he was the third child. But if Jen could go about freely, it didn't make sense. Had his parents lied? Don't you have to hide? He asked. Sure, Jen said. Mostly. But my parents are very good at bribery. And so am I. She grinned wickedly. So, for a second, Luke was very concerned. He thought his parents had lied. Like all of this hiding and all of this torture and all of this secrecy wasn't actually necessary, that they had lied for some sick, crazy reason. Because she had done so much more than he had. Is she supposed to be a secret just like him?
Yes.
Yes, she's still supposed to be secret.
Since her parents are rich, they can bribe.
Totally. It all comes back to money. Because if she does get found out, or if people do start asking questions, they just pay them off to keep silent. So money's the difference. It's not that her parents are more honest with her than his are with him. It just comes down to money. Then she squinted at Luke. How did you know I was a third child? How did you know I was here? Luke told her. Somehow it seemed important to start with the woods coming down, so it turned into a very long story. Jen interrupted frequently with questions and comments. So you've never been away from your house except to go to your backyard or barn? You've stayed inside for 6 months? And, gosh, you must really hate these houses, huh? Then when he got to the part about seeing her face in the window, she bit her lip. Oh, my dad would kill me if he knew I'd done that. But the mirrors were messed up, and Carlos bet me I didn't even know what the weather was outside, and... Huh? Mirrors? Carlos? Jen waved away his questions. Luke Garner, she announced solemnly, you have come to the right place. Forget that hiding like a mole stuff. I'm your ticket out.